In this edition of FSW Conversations, I am talking to Heidi Svane Pederson, a thought leader at the intersection of fashion, circular business models, and digital innovation. As head of digital for the Lifestyle and Design Cluster in Copenhagen, she helps brands leverage cutting-edge technologies like AI and blockchain to enhance transparency, reduce waste, and drive meaningful change in the industry. Thank you so much, Heidi, for joining us today. Just to start with, I would love for you to share your journey into fashion, sustainability, and digital tech. What inspired your focus on this intersection?
Thank you, Jessica, so much for having me. This is such an important topic, and I absolutely love that you are able to bring so many great people together and speak to this topic, because I believe that we need to listen to so many different voices to find that inspiration that can trigger my brand or my thoughts so I can find my way in this chaos of sustainability, future business models. I just want to create amazing products and consumers that are probably a little confused out there right now. But my pathway into this have been out of a commerce background. I was brought up in a retail shop when I was a kid, so I've always been around commerce. I ran my own retail for about 6 years until I realized I'm much better at developing it than actually being the CEO type. So I had somebody else take over that. And then I got into the field of innovation. And I've been as a private consultant working on the future of retail and in great projects. And then I finally ended up in this research center, which is called Lifestyle and Design Cluster. We're a national business cluster out of Denmark. And here it's our mission to support brands in being the most innovative in the world. And we do so by raising funding or matchmaking with research and the private sector, or really trying to bring together the partners that need each other, but maybe don't know each other. And my focus here and my great passion is the technology side of it. So I believe if you took out Gartner's hype cycle, you would have my career path jotted on all those lines. So now we're saying blockchain and AI, but when I started talking about this, we were in the field of talking about, do we want e-commerce? No, people will still go to shops. We don't really believe fully that they will have the need to buy things online. And so it's been a long journey of digital transformation. And now we're just on a next hype and a next wave of using these technologies to do better business and do better for the planet as well.
I love that. And I love the shout out to my former employer, Gartner. That was good. So I guess just speaking on the technology piece, I love how you focus on that sort of space where technology meets brand, products, and consumers. And I'm just wondering, from your POV, how can digital technologies like AI and blockchain help address sustainability challenges within fashion?
So the difficult thing about technologies is that when they're new and emerging, it almost feels like we have a technology looking for a problem to solve, right? So sometimes we need to get our hands on the technology and kind of force it down on the problems that we have today and not succeed and understand, oh, it's because the technology can do so and so. I still use the example of when we first were presented with website, we took the printed ad and put it on the website and figure out, oh, this doesn't work. Or when we were introduced to social media, we put the content from our website directly on the social media, and then realizing this isn't social, it's not engaging. So when we meet these new technologies, we always try to bring them in, have them in your hands almost, and learn from them. And we've been working with blockchain for the past 5 years, starting at a point where we thought this decentralized way of working together will be optimal in a supply chain for fashion or consumer goods that have low trust, a lot of different actors, and very low transparency. Just not as easy as it sounds, right? So as we've tested the technology, we really see that it has a lot of business possibilities. We saw a lot of strengths for blockchain to be utilized for circular business models, as in what we know from music, for example. When music is played today, there's a cut of the payment that still goes back to the artist. However, a piece of garment out there being resold or a piece of furniture, we've never heard about a royalty that can kick back for multiple generations, right? So blockchain is one of these solutions that with its smart contract and decentralized system can build up these infrastructures. So that's super interesting. For AI, I still feel it's very, I don't want to say new because the technology has been around for a long time, but as we see right now, most people are still testing it with their content when they're producing text and so on. But I believe one of the really interesting cases we've been involved in is forecasting. And with the linear timeline we have today, especially in fashion, it's super hard and complex to forecast and get the right inventory for the right customers. And that's an optimal space to utilize and decrease waste and overproduction.
And I know AI comes under many names and guises like machine learning, but I love this sort of essential for focus on data that you have for everything, because I think it's from that sort of feedback kind of test and learn type of approach that you build the best use cases for everything, but also the taking a focus on the problem solving aspect, I think is really great. Just to hone in on your focus on sustainability, I'm really curious to understand more about what you feel like the biggest hurdles for brands right now looking to be more sustainable, adopt more sustainable practices, and where technology can help them not just, I think, overcome those sort of adoption issues, but actually understand where technology can help them be more sustainable and understand sort of consumer opportunities within that space as well.
We see, at least out of the Nordic countries, Scandinavia in particular, that we're mostly built on small, medium sized companies. And I believe that could be more or less the same picture all over the world. So for these small, medium sized companies to have the resources, the funding, the insights to make these big changes, it's an industry that has never been legislated before. EU is putting out 16 new legislations that you have to follow in a minute. So overcoming these things is extremely hard. It's difficult to figure out how to organize yourself around it, how to upscale that insight you need and find the right resources, get that education going. And then all the while, you have a bunch of interesting technology providers calling you up saying that they have the holy grail and they can do everything for you. So we see, at least in the brands, that they're really struggling with how to organize, how to bring in the right competencies, and then how to navigate in which solutions, how to tackle this, how to deal with this. And then most of all, we have to move forward to an industry where we can make money on garments or on products several times, because we can't afford to produce the same as we do right now. So we need to decouple growth and production. We need to sell more and produce less. At least when I went to business school, that wasn't an equation. It was always produce more, then you get a better price, and then you're good to go. So we're looking at a future of decoupling. And that means that we have to figure out new business models. And that is extremely hard to pivot while you're in a linear, produce new, sell new, and then pivot over to totally different type of revenue stream.
I'd be actually curious to understand more about how you work to educate brands on adopting that new business mindset, because sustainability, it gets a lot of buzzwords around it. And I think for brands to really be able to level set, what does this actually mean? Yes, I have to participate, but why and what is the best way to approach this problem? I'm just curious how you educate and inform on this is how to tackle this for your brand. And also any examples you have of brands who've taken this on and have started to approach being more sustainable.
It's difficult to say what is sustainable and how we're working with it. And with that buzzword, there's been multiple translations of what that could be. So Lifestyle and Design Cluster works with this maturity or levels, because there are organizations that are first movers, that has it in their DNA that they want to push the agenda always, almost no matter what it is. And then you have brands that are more passive for their reasons, and they're maybe a little more fast follower strategy and kind of waiting for things to mature and be more standardized, and then they will move forward. So we try to offer all brands different level. It's free to interact with us because we raise the funding that is needed for projects or investments. So I really encourage brands to engage with us, because if you don't have that budget to be a first mover and learn, then you can use funding from organizations like our clusters. And we're out of the Scandinavian country, but there's clusters like ours all over the world. So find those possibility. And maybe if we should bring in a very specific example, we've worked with a brand that started and was very curious about blockchain technology because they were seeing this Excel spreadsheet and this crazy work on reporting, documenting certificates, really figuring out how to make sure that they were responsible. So if we could use this blockchain technology, then multiple actors could report on their old data and we could just use it, whatever data we needed from that string of data. But as they got started, they saw it was very difficult to onboard people to the blockchain. And maybe it wasn't that cost efficient as they expected it to be. A couple of years later, they pivot that idea and say, all right, we do need to create data. We need these certificates to document that we're behaving correctly. But how could we use this data to create value for the end users? And today they've launched a product where the care label has a QR code. And on top of the QR code, it says, don't cut me, I have value. So trying to nudge the consumer to scan the QR code. And when they scan it, it pops up with a free repair service, a way to resell it, or a way to dispose of it when you don't want to use it anymore. And I really like that they are trying, even though that we have to be careful on what we speak about when we say sustainability, they're really trying to bring it forward to create value for the end user. And that way, pull that experience back and use it to increase their way of thinking responsible.
And as a content strategist, I think the whole issue with a lot of the sustainability applications in digital product passports and all of that are just, what do you report? How often do you keep it updated? And what do consumers actually need that's meaningful to them? But it's always this sort of two-sided thing because you have legal and compliance standards you have to meet. And it's a very complex web. So I love that you're helping brands explore that.
I just want to support that a little bit because a lot of people are working with suppliers, customers that they have a high trust. They've been working, like Jessica and I, we've been working together for multiple years. We trust each other. So this whole way of saying, I need documentation, I need to collect data. And the first case we brought out was a shoe made out of really beautiful leather. Hide in general is a waste product of farming and meat industry. So they wanted to document that they weren't just using any type of leather. They were using a waste product from the food industry. So they created a blockchain where they traced all the way back to the cow and where the cow was and how the animal welfare had been, down to where the hide became a piece of leather, to the next stage into Italy where it was handmade. And that way, when you pulled off the shoe in the shop, it was just a QR code in the shoe. And you could see almost like a Google Maps, see that whole journey and maybe recognizing, all right, I'm paying maybe $300 for this pair of shoe, but now I can recognize why. Now I can see all the hands that have been involved. And I don't think a lot of consumers are used to this. And especially when you sit down in the kitchen table or at the next get together with friends, there's always somebody around the table that knows about cars or knows about carpeting and can kind of, oh, are you doing this to your house? You shouldn't think about that. You should do like this. Or are you buying a new car? You should think about this. But at least out of Scandinavia in the 90s, we lost all production of textiles. So there's hardly anybody around the kitchen table to tell you and call you out on, what are you wearing? Is that something you picked out of the store for $10? Do you recognize who's getting paid on this value chain? Do you understand this? And that insight and that kind of knowledge is lost.
And I love the possibility of technology playing that role in sort of consumer education. And I think for brands, consumer engagement and bringing consumers onto this journey that brands have themselves have been on for a while is so important. I'm actually just curious to keep going with this in terms of the role of digital tools and educating and connecting with audiences about sustainability, because I love that example of it's a little gruesome of following the shoe journey since the cow, but I think there are so many positive applications of that for consumers. But there's also, as you mentioned before, there's also a lot of buzzwords and a lot of greenwashing that goes on. What sort of concrete ways can digital tools really be used to educate and connect with audiences about sustainability in ways that are not overwhelming? I love that example of the shoe. But I'm just wondering if you have any others in terms of just not just engaging consumers, but I think really trying to use that trust lever, if you will, to produce better practices when it comes to both shopping and consumption habits.
I think in terms of that, we shouldn't isolate and only think what is other luxury brands or what are other textile brands or what are other brands doing. We should really look to other industries. And we have a really strong platform out of the Nordics called Too Good To Go, which is a platform where you can go online and buy grocery products. So when the shop is closing down on the street and they have goods that needs to be sold today, otherwise they are thrown away, they can put all these goods on sale. So like 10 minutes before the store closes, you can come down and pick your Too Good To Go bag. So that's a neat collaboration, and they've used technology to merge the shop and users that wants to buy these products. But they have done an excellent job on translating what my impact is. So when I pick up a Too Good To Go bag, I get this little digital dashboard where it says, oh, today, Heidi, you saved 100 cups of warm coffee, or you saved 5 hours in a hot shower. So they reflect that CO2 footprint into something that is familiar for me and recognizable. And I don't think anybody knows that out of 1 kilo of textiles, 5 to 10 kilos of chemicals have gone into that piece of dieting process. Or when you're buying 1 kilo of polyester, did you know that they dragged out 8 kilos of oil? So that reference is not present. And is it gonna be with all end users? Maybe not. But I recognize that during this process of us watching at least brands working with the digital product passport, they hardly know these processes. They hardly know their value chain. And if I'm buying from this brand, it better make sure that they have their business in line.
Oh, that's fascinating. And actually, just to talking about the production process for emerging fashion, look, I've spent a lot of time in the digital fashion space, and I have a lot of interest in the role of technology like 3D printing and virtual fashion to really, I think, reduce the sort of design to production type of environmental impact. And I'm just curious for you, what role you feel those emerging technologies play. My friend Louise Lang owns Digital Twin, and I think they're just doing amazing things. And I think there's so many great actors doing these very sort of practical applications of virtual fashion. So I'm just wondering from your end, what role you feel they play in bringing better practices to the industry?
I absolutely love this because digital fashion, I felt like it, the Fabricant took a big stunt and was very recognized for this extreme expensive piece of digital garment. And in Denmark, we have a famous author called Hans Christian Andersen. He wrote this fairy tale on the king that walked around naked until a kid says, oh, he's not wearing anything. And I've kept talking about digital fashion, and everybody brings up this fairy tale and say, oh my gosh, Heidi, we all need to wear clothes. So why are you talking about this digital clothes? And I just have to say one thing in that. Look at your kids. Where are they creating social currency today? So in my school time, it was whatever I wore to school that would add to my social currency. Was I wearing something cool? Was I wearing something branded? Was I wearing something that stood out? At least I can see with my kids and their social peers is if it's Roblox, if it's Minecraft, if it's Dress to Impress, or whatever tool they're playing with their friends in, It's what their digital avatar is wearing. It's what they have built their house in this digital space that they're playing around in. And that gives us as an industry, at least from my perspective, maybe 10 years to pick up with them, because in 10 years' time, they're going to be consumers and they're going to be used to having access to the world of colors and creativity and being able to design whatever they like themselves. And then if they walk into a store where they can't tailor something, where they can't be part of the design process, where they can't just have something for 2 days and then let it go and have something else, they're going to be, I think, very not upset, but surprised that you haven't connected the dots in terms of using digital tools in your design process to bring down sample sales and be proactive in the way you engage with your audience. We were just in Silicon Valley with 20 brands last September visiting Unspun, who's weaving machine factory that just out of a video can connect the data set that needs for them to customize a pair of jeans. Or later we visited Levi's and how they have integrated 3D in their design process. So there's no need for marketing to wait until they have their first sample. They can just instantly connect to design and start testing. Is somebody willing to buy this? What price can we put it on? And put that word out there. So I think if you're not looking into this topic yet, you need to find a digital grown-up friends that can, or maybe a digital kid that can show you what the next stage is.
And alpha parents know my son's in Roblox, and it's been fascinating to watch his evolution from a gingerbread man avatar into like kind of more human looking ones with like fashion POV and all of that. Just to dive to sort of a different side of industry practices, the supply chain is often cited as a huge pain point for sustainability. And I'm just curious from your perspective how digital innovation can improve supply chain transparency and efficiency.
I guess the best way is to bring a case forward, because every brand has their supply chain. It feels a little difficult to say something in general because that feels like that couldn't work for me. But we have followed Gina Tricot for some time, a brand out of Sweden, and they are in the brand portfolio of like a H&M kind of brand status. And they were curious about how they were going to be able to move from that fast fashion stage. How would they be able to pick more expensive material, document more traceability, be more transparent about how they produce their products? So they did first a capsule collection 2 years ago where everything was produced in Sweden, and they used the blockchain to connect every dot along the supply chain to have complete transparency. They bumped up the price quite a bit for that capsule collection because it was produced places where you have higher wages and things like that. And it sold out in 2 hours. So they were confirmed that, all right, when we do it right, we still have a consumer base that want to tap into this. So now they've started a longer research process where they have installed IoT sensors in their factory in Bangladesh that reports primary data into the blockchain on how is the humidity, how is the heat, how is the air in that production hall. Then it connects with the data point where when I walk down to my sewing machine and I start working on a Gina Tricot garment, I have like a touch system on an iPad where, all right, I'm working on this production right now. That connects with the payroll. So it instantly plugs in the data that Heidi has worked on this and Heidi has been paid for this as well. So these primary data is in their test phase right now. And they're really curious about this because if we can get primary data where no people have touched with us, maybe we can actually get trust data as well that hasn't been pampered with. So I really like their way of going full on board because they have seen that they were able to find customers that want to buy this. And in that way, they're able to increase the price, but also cut all the waste and all the middlemen that are costing money in this value chain. And that way they can use that extra money to pay for data. So that's a whole new conversation in a value chain when I'm not telling you, Jessica, oh, yeah, by the way, you need to send me this Excel spreadsheet with 125 lines. I just did it for 5 other brands. You need to do it for me as well. Do I get paid? No. Do I get any extra time? No, I just need this because EU is claiming documentation. I really like that we can get into a conversation where everybody can get paid and get paid equally for their investment.
That's an absolutely incredible example. And I think it brings up so many questions and problems with the supply chain in terms of everything from fair wages, as you say, to worker conditions, to just that sort of transparency in terms of just exchange of goods and services. So that's an amazing example. I would love any other case studies you may have that you're able to share on other brands and designers who are excelling at that intersection between digital innovation and sustainability. Because again, I feel like what a lot of conversations about sustainability, and even in my arena, sustainability content strategy lack or really clear-cut practical examples of even success and failure, but people piloting things and seeing what works. Because I think a lot of brands, as you say, are testing things out, but they're not understandably putting everything out there. And I'm just wondering from your end what you're able to share with brands who are trying things out and what they're learning.
We can share everything. We're a publicly funded organization. So whenever we run projects and cases, everything is open and available to the public. And I really think that's important because nobody can do this alone. So we're in a situation where we need to collaborate, like collaborate in the morning, compete in the afternoon, right? And strongest competitors, we need to link up with them, and we need to find our way of what can we do with sustainability as one brand. Because now Gina Tricot was one case, but I absolutely love Global Fashion Agenda, supported bringing together a bunch of suppliers and the brands. So for example, bestseller and H&M out of Scandinavia, bringing them together and talking about how can we make a change here. And this is where the CFO came in. And this is what I love about their case, is that we often end up talking about sustainability with the sustainability manager, and they're frustrated and stuck because they're reporting and working with certificates, which is normally something sourcing or finance would have the capabilities of doing. And they're trying to gather all this data, but they don't have a language to speak with marketing and branding. So it's really go back, figure out what roadmap could you work with. But the case of Global Fashion Agenda, bestseller, and H&M, and a couple of other brands, were that they pulled together the resources to invest in green energy in their production sites, actually installing solar panels and supporting these factories, which doesn't have all the resources. One day they're asked, please reduce water in your production, but I also need you to produce this garment, which increases water 30%. So many barriers and possibilities, but I love these multiple actor projects where you make an investment for a bigger purpose, but it supports your brand individually as well.
And I think for bigger brands, it's such a great thing to hear them do. But I also know that you support a lot of smaller and independent brands. And so I'm just wondering, how do you help them keep up with the technology and sustainability demands of all of this? Because obviously they don't have the budget. They tend to lack both the awareness and the education, I think, and even access to the tools they need to do this. I know there are a lot of native D2C brands that are sustainability by their sort of inception, but there are other brands that aren't.
I think there's still time to change. Don't freak out. Don't think you missed the train. Don't panic. Just slowly get your act together and make an idea of what to move forward. And one step is one step. We had a furniture brand that actually created a brand new product line that they called one seat at a time, because they felt like they constantly tried to push the barriers of sustainability. But as soon as they moved forward, something else changed again. So they wanted to communicate that they were doing their best, trying to constantly push forward. And they named the product line one seat at a time to really symbolize this. So I love that storytelling, and think that very honest and openness that brands dare to use, that supports that their consumers feel like they can go on the journey with them. Because everybody can understand change is difficult, But if you don't get any communication and you just assume, oh my gosh, they're doing this as a big brand, then everybody else can do it as well, right? So being open and honest. And I love small, medium-sized companies. They're agile and their decision-making processes are often a lot faster. So they can instantly test something, evaluate it, and implement it. They're really vulnerable in the supply chain because they don't have a lot of decision power when they're a small, medium sized company. But we see, at least out of Denmark, we're one of the highest ranking countries when it comes to resell. So the whole resell, as in shops or online resell, is really growing fast. It's 14% of the consumption today. And there's put forward an ambition that by 2050, 80% of the revenue in Denmark comes from secondhand sale. And this is actually where we see the smaller brands moving first because they can pick up a fast revenue, but they also see new customers coming into the brand and new awareness. And it gives them an opportunity to understand, how long does my product actually live? Where did it go? Why did people throw it away, or why did they resell it? So that insight after retail is a black box for most brands. And that insight really gains motivation for doing something different.
That's fascinating. And I love that goal of 80% resale by 2050. And I think you see so many brands now starting to own their own resale process as opposed to leaving it to the Vestieres and RealReals of the world. So I think we see more and more of that. And I think especially for the repairs, I think that's a really powerful thing for brands to own. Just to go back up a level, I'm just curious for you, from all of the work that you do, since we're prognosticating, what future trends do you see shaping the relationship between fashion, sustainable, and digital technology?
I think I was really struck by a case when we visited Silicon Valley here last time. And it was a startup called Mirror AI. And these amazing women that built this platform is building a hyper personalized experience. So the idea, you recognize it from the movie Clueless some years ago, but the idea of having a digital closet and being able to really, what should I wear today? And all these questions that can be a very annoying things in the morning getting out of the house. What I loved about this was that they took it a step forward. So not just digitalizing your wardrobe, but connecting it to, all right, Heidi, here's a product you haven't used for a long time. Do you want to resell it? Connecting their platform to resell platforms or branded platform, actually sharing that data and saying, hey, there's a request for this product and you haven't used it for a long time. Do you want to ship it off to somebody else who could love it? Now you don't anymore. And that sparked a really interesting topic for me because we've seen glimpses of hyper disrupted companies in the luxury and fashion industry, but we haven't really seen a Airbnb or an Uber or the whole Nokia Apple
Yeah.
story. We haven't really seen that big breakthrough in our industry yet. But fast forward 5 years from now, when we have digital product passport implemented, we have digital solutions that can digitalize your wardrobe. All of a sudden, these products that are dead in your house can be activated. And for me, that whole data hub and connecting demand and supply in a totally next level is going to be super interesting. And I hope in the future that I have this digital wallet on my blockchain with my data so I can just open it up and say, I'm going to this party or I'm going to this job interview or I'm going to this customer meeting. What do I need to wear? And the data can just be used to put together whatever I specifically need.
I think that's amazing from the standpoint, especially, look, I'm a content strategist, so I can't turn that off. But I think a lot of the gap on the sort of audience side of things, it is hyper personalization, but this sort of urge that social media has brought up from everyone to co-create in a sort of community building type of thing. And I think to both at once personalize, but also build community and that sort of connection point in a way that you're really, I think, directly contributing to a more sustainable ecosystem for fashion is incredibly powerful. So I love that. And I really hope that's the direction we go in. I think that's great. Just as a final closer, if people want to understand more about your research or just find out more about what you do, where can they find you online?
They're always welcome to find Lifestyle and Design Cluster. So we are this national business cluster, and that means that we're open for contact in any sort of way. And especially our focus is pushing forward the circular business models using international relations and really the digital capabilities that can be the means to reach the goals.
Thank you so much for your time today, Heidi. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for putting these topics forward and creating this platform for engaging.
Thank you for joining us for another great discussion as part of FSW Conversations. For deeper analysis and insights, please visit Fashion Strategy Weekly at fashionstrategyweekly.com, a media publication of Strategy Agency It's a Working Title. For questions, comments, and concerns, please reach out to our media team at info@itsworkingtitle.com. This podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all of your favorite podcasting platforms.